Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back, and we are going to do in this video a review of all of the spoilers that happen in Deadpool and Wolverine, and there are a lot. I think the count at the moment is 45 different cameos, Easter eggs and little references to X-Men, the MCU and things even beyond that. So we're probably not going to go through all 45, but we're definitely going to go through some of the biggest ones in there. So let's get into it. Straight off the bat with this movie, it had one of the best opening sequences of any Marvel movie, maybe of any movie ever. It's very like James Bond-esque with Deadpool films, that they have like an intro with like opening credits and the way that they do it with music and things like that. So in this, the very first thing that you see is Deadpool going and trying to dig up Logan's body, because of course he died at the end of Logan. So Deadpool needs Wolverine to save his timeline, his universe. And in his mind, he thinks, well, Wolverine regenerates in the same way that Deadpool does. So Deadpool doesn't believe that Wolverine actually died. So he goes to dig up his body in the belief that maybe there's a sort of half alive Wolverine buried underground. And unfortunately, what he finds is nothing but an adamantium skeleton. But what's so brilliant about it is that then the TVA turn up to capture Deadpool, and it just turns into this incredible sequence of Deadpool using Logan's adamantium skeleton as a weapon to just annihilate all of these TVA agents. But he does it to NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye, and he even throws in a bit of a dance sequence to it as well. And it is just the funniest, most brilliantly light-hearted, entertaining Easter egg and opening sequence to a movie that I was instantly hooked, and I could just feel the energy in the room. Like everybody was just really into it straight away. A great opening sequence. There's so many videos I've seen online on like TikTok and stuff, and I've started doing them as well, just using that soundtrack and those dance moves just to kind of like set the tone, because honestly that was just such a brilliant way to introduce the movie, and it just gets better and better from there. The story basically goes along the lines of that the TVA is trying to get rid of Deadpool's timeline, and the essence of it is basically that Deadpool has a choice. He can either go along with that, let his timeline die, and if so, he can join the sacred timeline. In other words, he can join the MCU. So naturally, Deadpool is playing with the audience a little bit when he talks about it. He wants to be an Avenger. And one of the first things you see in this movie is that actually Deadpool, or Wade Wilson, actually had an interview with Happy Hogan, trying to join the Avengers a few years prior, and essentially getting rejected because obviously Deadpool doesn't really fit the bill of your typical Avenger, and the reason why he's kind of saving the world is more because he wants it rather than because other people want him to do it. So but there's tons of Easter eggs that are thrown into that interview scene. So in Happy Hogan's office, you get the I don't know if you guys will remember, but there was like a little Easter egg to Captain America's shield, I think in Iron Man 2, that Agent Coulson sort of picks it up and it's like half destroyed, and he just throws it away or uses it as a stand for something. And that shield is on the wall in Happy Hogan's desk, and you see it there. And there's a lot of other little things kind of dotted around, including, and this was actually a really touching scene, you had a sort of toy version of Iron Man's helmet that Peter Parker used as a kid. If you remember, there's this Easter egg that there's a scene in Iron Man 2 where Iron Man kind of flies down, he's trying to save everybody from the Expo that's under attack from all of these killer robots and whatnot, and there's a little kid wearing an Iron Man helmet who sticks his hand up, he's basically pretending to be Iron Man, and in canon that is actually Peter Parker. That is a young Peter Parker, and it's his helmet that's sitting on the side in Happy Hogan's desk. But it was actually really touching, because what you see is that helmet. You don't see any reference to Spider-Man, because of course in canon everyone's been made to forget about him. That was the spell from Doctor Strange, and it's actually worked. Like, yeah, okay, you've got his helmet there, but that's more of a nod to Iron Man's story, and it's a little reference to Spider-Man without referencing Spider-Man. So everyone's forgotten about Spider-Man, and that's really funny, although there is a little bit of a scene later on where Deadpool is sort of pretending to be Spider-Man and like going pew 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 like this. So he's sort of playing with the audience again, and that whole like breaking the third wall, fourth wall, whatever it is, it obviously happens a lot. But I love that. I love that little kind of playing with the audience thing, and we'll get onto some more of that later. So Deadpool is going out of his way to, after all of that business with the TVA, to go and find a Wolverine. It basically turns out that Wolverine is known as an anchor entity, and that means that as soon as a particular person or a character in a universe dies, that universe will eventually cease to exist. And in this case, the TVA want to accelerate that process for whatever reason. And Logan, of course, has died in the sort of Fox X-Men franchise. And because of that, TVA is saying, well, we've got to kill it. And it's just such a brilliant way to kind of take the MCU and everything outside of the MCU that's owned by Fox. So obviously the X-Men, but also things like Fantastic Four, the original Blade movies, you know, Daredevil, Elektra, all of these things, and actually sort of play with the audience again and sort of say, okay, well, actually the TVA are the ones that decide that those franchises, as well as those actual timelines, stop. And that becomes really key later on in the movie. But I loved the way that they tied it in and actually made it relevant. And what they're saying to Deadpool is that they're prepared to save him and stick him into the MCU timeline, but only if he's willing to let that timeline, the Fox timeline, basically die, his timeline. And he doesn't want to do that. He wants to save the people that he cares about. So he goes out of his way to try to find a replacement Logan by jumping through the multiverse to try to find another Wolverine that he can take out of whatever universe and bring it into his, in the weird hope that it'll somehow fix everything. And he goes through all of these different types of Wolverine. And if you're a massive sort of Wolverine comic book fan, you're going to love it because there's so many different versions of him that you see. You see like the yellow and brown suit that comes out of the comics that Hugh Jackman is wearing. You also see like the white tuxedo version of Logan that you see in the comic books as well, and tons and tons and tons of others. There's loads of them. But one of them was not played by Hugh Jackman. One of them was played by Henry Cavill. He actually does a version of the Wolverine in that sequence, which is absolutely awesome. Like the shock in the audience, you could feel it. It was genuinely really shocking to sort of see him there. And of course, Deadpool jokes about the fact that he wants to actually use the Henry Cavill version of Wolverine and tries to tempt him to come back with him in the hope that, you know, he's joking that perhaps DC don't look after him particularly well and that maybe he'd be better off in Marvel Studios. So it's a great gag and it sort of really works in the confines of the story as well. So a brilliant little cameo and a great Easter egg, but that whole sequence is just one giant Easter egg. It's just really, really cool. So if you're a Wolverine comics fan, you're going to love that bit. As the story progresses, essentially what happens is that Wolverine and Deadpool, because eventually he finds a Wolverine, they then go back to the TVA and sort of plead the case that they can bring that Wolverine into Deadpool's timeline to restore it and stop it from being destroyed. The TVA basically laugh him off and say that's not how it works, and then they actually technically kill them. I don't know if you remember in Loki, but in the TVA have like these batons that they use, and if they poke you with it, you vaporize and you disappear, and you go to a place called the Void, and that is where the two characters then end up. And the Void is just full of characters that you would not have expected to see, but there is loads of them, and it's very sort of like Mad Max-esque in the setting of it and the way that they do it. But eventually you meet one of the first major cameos in this film, and my personal favourite. They basically, with the music, and you see this hooded figure, you believe it's Captain America. And then all of a sudden he jumps down, pulls off his hood, and it's Chris Evans. Chris Evans is actually there, and you can see underneath his hood and his shawl and everything that he's got the blue suit on. But as a fight sequence starts to break out, it's a big trick on the audience because he suddenly bursts into flames. Chris Evans is the Human Torch from those original Fantastic Four movies. He's not there as Captain America, he's there as the Human Torch. And honestly, I was so amazed when I saw that. That was just so exciting. It was brilliant because you thought it was going to be Captain America. It turned out that it wasn't. It was just a great throwback to those earlier films. Really good fun. Like I just such enjoyed that cameo and that performance. And you know, I almost feel like I'm grateful to Chris Evans to agreeing to do this. And he's not just in it for a few seconds. He's in quite a few scenes, and it's just a great little throwback to those movies. And yeah, kudos to Chris Evans for actually agreeing to do that because it was just so cool and a great little nod to the fans that have been watching these comic book movies for so long, it was great to really see that. I really enjoyed that cameo. Then basically go off and start fighting against these antagonists that are hiding in the void, including like the main villain in the story. And it's essentially all about them trying to find a way to get out of the void. And there's only really one way to do it. But while they're on the run from these like Mad Max characters, a lot of whom you will recognize from the X-Men, they've all essentially just been dumped off in the void because their worlds have finished. And that's where they are. And you have all of these mutants that are running around, including guys like the original Pyro that you had from the X-Men movies. He's in there as well and gets quite a few scenes. So, you know, you've also got like lots of little X-Men characters like that have been in previous movies. However, while Deadpool and Wolverine are kind of on the run from them, they end up meeting the beginning of what becomes Deadpool Corps, or I always used to call them Team Deadpool, but it's not, it's the Deadpool Corps, and it's basically just like hundreds of variants of Deadpool. Now, you only see two of them at this moment, and that is like Happy Deadpool, I think they call him Friendly Paul. It's still Ryan Reynolds, but without his mask on, and for some reason has very long hair, and he's just unbelievably friendly. Friendly Paul. And with him comes Dog Paul, who is just like the ugliest dog you've ever seen in your life. I think that dog actually has won an award as being the ugliest dog in the UK. So congratulations to that dog. But it's just a little bit of fun when you see him. So you've got, yeah, like Friendly Paul and Dog Paul there, and they basically help Wolverine and Logan to find a car. And as they're driving off, they get captured by somebody because essentially Wolverine and Deadpool end up having a big fight, as they constantly do throughout this film. And while they're lying sort of basically wounded and trying to recover in the car, someone gets into it, drives off and takes them to a sort of secret underground base. And in that base, there is the most incredible reveal of yet more just unbelievable cameos, like these characters that you would never have guessed would be in this movie. So first of all, we will go with Jennifer Garner actually reprises her role of Elektra, which you might remember from the Daredevil movie. This, again, I never would have predicted that we would ever see that character played by her again, like, ever. That was Ben Affleck's original Daredevil movie that he was in, and Daredevil's not in it, but they do reference him. They basically say that he had already gone, he was there but had basically been killed off by the bad guys that are in the void. But Elektra's in it and she's cool, she's just as she always was. But yeah, it's just another one of these just incredible cameos, because you never would have predicted that you would have seen that, and it actually somehow gets better from there. Because the next person who steps out alongside Elektra is Blade. The original Wesley Snipes reprises his role as Blade in this and walks into the room, and he's still just as cool as ever. And he's there, still decked out in all of his original costume, surrounded by weapons and swords and blades and knives and daggers and all this kind of stuff that you'd expect him to have. And he's just, again, so cool and so iconic. And it's just, again, this throwback as a thank you to comic book fans that have been seeing these movies for decade after decade and just being like so loyal to the fan base. They are really giving back, I felt, in this movie. And seeing Wesley Snipes as Blade again was just brilliant. He jokes about the fact that he will be the only Blade ever, and Deadpool kind of looks at the camera and to the audience, because he knows obviously they are rebooting Blade. But it was just a great little kind of side joke from Wesley Snipes in that. And later on they do full-on action sequences, and he's just as awesome as ever. So that was really cool. I was genuinely surprised and really happy to see him there. But probably I felt like the funniest cameo in this team, because the next person who walked through the door was Channing Tatum as Gambit. And not a lot of people will know this, some of you will. He was originally cast to play Gambit in his own spin-off movie that basically got cancelled. And he's here though in the outfit, the full-on costume with all the powers. He looks great. He's got a terrible French accent and nobody understands what he's saying, which I think is probably one of the reasons why they canned it in the first place. But they make a great joke about the fact that when these characters are talking, they talk about their origins and their endings and all this kind of stuff. Well, Gambit turns around and says, well, he doesn't actually know what his ending and his origin is, because of course he never had one, he never actually had a movie. And they're constantly making digs at him and making jokes about the fact that this is his only performance and is the only time that you'll ever actually get to see him as Gambit. So again, it's really funny. It's just brilliantly well done, and a huge surprise to see him in there. Like, I never in a million years would I predicted that any of those three characters would be in this film. And it's just great references to these Fox franchises, all part of the X-Men or before the X-Men. And yeah, I was blown away by this. Like, those three walking into the room just blew my mind. That was absolutely incredible. And this is, of course, with Chris Evans having already been in it as well, which was just incredible. So great cameos throughout. This was really, really cool. The next person that walked into the room was X-23. A little bit less of a surprise because I feel like we all kind of expected her to be in this. So it wasn't a huge shock, but a great throwback to the Logan movie. And again, it's just like these little nods to everything that's come before, the X-Men franchise, the Fox franchises that they had before Disney took them and canned them. And the whole idea is that the TVA have been going around and killing off their timelines, but the way that they describe it, it's basically also saying that Disney ended those franchises and stopped them, or Fox did, or they got cancelled, and those characters have just ended up in the void with no real ending. And that's kind of the key to this, is that all of those characters that are there, what they really, really want is just to have one final send-off. And the brilliant thing about this movie is that it gives it to them. So we finally get to see, like, Blade have his final hurrah, his big send-off. The same with Elektra, the same with X-23, and the same with Gambit, but it's also his origin at the same time, and that's kind of the joke for him. But it was just great to have those characters back again, just for, even if like a brief moment. They were all so cool. I think Blade probably the standout one for me, alongside the Human Torch. That was just brilliantly well done, so well executed. They kept that secret for a very, very long time, but it didn't end there. Eventually, Deadpool and Wolverine do manage to escape the void and go back into the sacred timeline where they confront the TVA. And the TVA have built a machine that's basically capable of cutting these timelines a lot shorter. They used to be able to go back and prune them like they did in Loki, but apparently that's not a thing anymore. So now they've built a machine that will go back and end timelines really, really quickly, rather than let them die out over, say, like 1,000 years or more. So in this, the bad guy, if you like, the main bad guy, who is the twin sister of Charles Xavier, no less, she is trying to use the machine she just wants to destroy every timeline that she can possibly get her hands on. So in order to stop her, Wolverine and Deadpool have returned to the sacred timeline to put an end to what she's doing. However, in order to do that, they need to get to a particular place, and standing in their way is the Deadpool core. And Deadpool core still has Friendly Pool and Dog Pool in them, but we see some incredible cameos and actors playing Deadpool that we never would have seen coming. One of them was always heavily rumoured, and that is Blake Lively appearing as Lady Pool. And she's really cool in it, actually. She's actually really good. She's not in it for very long, but it's a great little reference and an Easter egg. And Lady Pool is just awesome. So it was great to see her there. She had the weapons and everything. It was just action-packed. And it's a fantastic fight sequence between Wolverine and Deadpool, just blitzing their way through hundreds of different versions of Deadpool and just laying waste to all of them, because arguably, like, Wolverine and Deadpool are somehow more, they're not more powerful, but they certainly seem to be like better versions of all of the rest of these Deadpools. They just don't seem to be quite as good. So Deadpool's able to just defeat them, but it's just a brilliant sequence. It's unbelievably gory and violent and brilliant, and definitely R-rated. But yeah, Blake Lively is Lady Pool. A lot of people predicted that she would be the person playing that character, but either way, it doesn't matter. I was just really happy to see Lady Pool in there. I thought that was really cool. Amongst all of the Deadpool variants, we also had Cowboy Deadpool, who was played by none the less Matthew McConaughey. Actually played Cowboy Deadpool, and obviously he's got that great voice and that great accent. He keeps his mask on the whole time, so you don't know that it's him until you see the end credits, but it is actually Matthew McConaughey is there as Cowboy Deadpool, and it's just really cool. It's just a brilliant bit of fun, and I think that's the key with this movie, is it's all about just fun. And it was a brilliant little cameo. He's only in it for like a tiny little amount of time, but I really appreciated it. I thought it was kind of cool. The other little cameo version of Deadpool that we had was Headpool, where it's basically literally like Deadpool's head, which is the only thing that survived after a zombie plague, and that is voiced by Nathan Fillion, who is a massive, great big name in sci-fi movies, as I'm sure many of you will know, and he plays the voice of Deadpool. So again, it's just another little kind of cameo, a little bit of a nod. You also had, although you don't really see them very much, a lot of Deadpools were played by Ryan Reynolds' family members, including his children who played Kid Paul and Baby Paul, and I think his brothers were also playing like other versions of Deadpool as well. So they're all in there, and it's all just great fun. It's just really, really funny and cool and brilliant. I keep calling him Friendly Paul, but actually it's Nice Paul is actually his official name, and he's just basically really, really nice. But he's the one and only Deadpool that can't regenerate. So Nice Paul actually ends not so nicely, to be honest with you, but he's unbelievably annoying as just like this constant friendly character, and it's Ryan Reynolds. It actually reminded me of Free Guy, like just so super friendly and super happy and helpful all the time, but he can't regenerate. So Deadpool ends up basically using him as a human shield, as all of these other Deadpools are trying to shoot at him. Violent, gory, funny, just really, really cool. There's a lot of other little things, and I mentioned it before about going and seeing all these different versions of Wolverine. I think probably my favourite was Short Wolverine, who literally jumps off a bar stool and is like 4 foot tall. It's a bit of an inside joke because in the comic books he's actually really, really short. So it was kind of like a little funny little gag, but again, just another little reference to the comic books that I think people will enjoy, and it was really funny. There was also a little bit of a Hulk versus Wolverine reference as well. So the Hulk does appear in this, just albeit very, very briefly, and it's him fighting Wolverine in that comic book arc that they're so well known for. And I would like to have maybe seen a little bit more of it, but it's there and it's good fun, and again, it's just another little reference for fans to pick up on. Hunter B-15 also makes an appearance in the TVA, and it seems as though she's more in charge than she used to be as well, which I dare say is probably after Loki season 2. So she is there as well. It's just she doesn't really say a lot, she doesn't really do a lot, but she does seem to be in charge, or at least to some degree she's in charge of what's going on at the TVA. But she's a good character in this, and it's just a nice little reference and a throwback to those Loki series. One character that we did know was going to be in this as well is Sabretooth, because we'd seen him in the trailers, and again, he's not in it for very long, but he's there enough to be able to give you that throwback to those original X-Men films, and it's a great little Easter egg and a little reference back to those movies. Going back through some of the other X-Men characters that appear in this, Toad is one of the kind of like bad guys that's hiding out in the void, and again, just another one of these mutants that's there. Similarly, as I said before with Pyro, he's still there as well. He seems to be leading a lot of the kind of like bad X-Men mutants that are in the void as well. He actually gets quite a bit of screen time compared to the other ones, a lot more dialogue, and he's basically kind of leading the charge in terms of trying to hunt Deadpool down when they're lost in the void somewhere. So yeah, Pyro is another one that we see. Callisto makes an appearance from X-Men The Last Stand, a much smaller character, but again, it's another throwback to those original X-Men films. Alioth is actually the big bad that ends up killing most of the people that are in the void, including all of these mutants and these variants, Blade, Elektra, X-23 and Gambit. They all end up falling victim to Alioth while Deadpool and Wolverine escape the void. But Alioth, of course, we know series-wise from Loki, and in season 1, I think it was in Loki where we see Alioth. So again, it's just tying this all together and just making this all work, bringing MCU and X-Men and mutants and the TV shows, Disney Plus. You know, the whole thing comes together really nicely in this movie, and they do a great job of tying it together seamlessly. The Void actually gives them a great opportunity and a way to do it that makes sense and works really nicely. Like, it could have been a terrible mess. Like, how would you bring in all of these characters? Well, the multiverse story works, but bringing them all together in the Void and actually then having an explanation as to why not just the universe is stopped, but how they can still be part of the MCU, like those original Daredevil movies and the original Fantastic Four movies. They are now officially part of the MCU, and this is how, and the Void and then this story that they're telling with the TVA actually explains why those franchises stopped and why those characters aren't around anymore. So it's actually really well done, and I really appreciated the fact that they kind of took the time to think about how they were going to do it. They don't spend like a vast amount of time like ramming it down your throat, but they just give you enough of an explanation to kind of think, okay, that works, this is absolutely fine, and it brings it all together just really nicely. Other characters that we see from the X-Men is Azazel. He was originally in, I think it was First Class, the X-Men films. So again, it's just another character that appears throughout this. The other one is Juggernaut, and actually he ends up not really playing a key role, but he's key to the story in that they need his helmet to basically trap the bad guy and stop her thoughts from being able to escape and mind control people. So Juggernaut is in this, but it's played by a different actor. It's not someone that we've seen before, and this, I think they joke about the fact that this is like the third or fourth different version of the character they've had. But yes, Juggernaut does make an appearance, and it's very much in the costume that you see from the original X-Men movies. Lady Deathstrike is another one as well from the original X-Men movies that we see, albeit very, very briefly. She again is another one of these mutants that's there in the void, and is one of the sort of like hitmen, if you like, that they're using to track down Deadpool and Wolverine. Another one is Psylocke, who I thought in Apocalypse was a bit underrated, really, to be honest with you. But yeah, she's from X-Men Apocalypse, and she again makes an appearance in this. Another one of these mutants that's caught up in the void. I mentioned Captain America's shield before from Iron Man 2, and there's also a little scene on Happy Hogan's desk. I mean, it's just an Easter egg, the fact that Happy Hogan's in it, but on his desk is also Tony Stark's arc reactor. I don't know if you remember, but in Endgame you had it where there was proof that he had a heart. It's that one that he's got on his desk, and it's just a nice little touching memorial, if you like, and a little throwback to that Infinity Saga and those early Iron Man movies, and obviously with what happened to Tony Stark in Endgame as well. And again, it's just collectively bringing all of these Marvel franchises under one umbrella, and it's just a really nice little reference, so I really appreciated it. On the subject of like objects as well, you see lots of things scattered around the void, and even references to 20th Century Fox, but the Milano is one that's actually in there as well, the ship that's used by the Guardians of the Galaxy. We don't see any characters from that, but you do see the ship sort of hidden in the void. It's not easy to spot, but if you do see it, there is just that little reference to Guardians of the Galaxy as well. So again, just tying in the MCU with the X-Men just really, really nicely. And again, on the subject of stuff, you have basically a giant foot which used to belong to one of the Sentinel robots. That came from Days of Future Past, and they use that as a means to escape one of the fight scenes while they're in the void as well, by sort of grabbing onto it, igniting it and flying off into the air. But again, it's just those little Easter eggs and those little references that fans really enjoy. The sling ring is another one as well, that the Cassandra is the main protagonist in this, and she has what we assume is Doctor Strange's sling ring. She doesn't actually refer to Doctor Strange, although Deadpool does, because obviously he jokes with it about it to the audience. But she has a sling ring that she uses to allow Deadpool and Wolverine to escape the void. She does it because they basically save her life when Pyro tries to shoot her, or does shoot her successfully. She's not able to save herself because at that point she's got Juggernaut's helmet on, which is stopping her from being able to use her mind control powers and telekinesis and all this sort of thing. Pyro takes the opportunity to shoot her, and basically Deadpool and Wolverine make the decision to save her, and in doing so she then returns the favour by using Doctor Strange's sling ring to return them back to the sacred timeline. One of the things which you all knew was going to be this, because it's massively in the trailer, is Ant-Man's giant corpse, and they've basically turned his entire body into a base. There's obviously a joke in there where Deadpool turns to the audience and says about the fact that actually it's proof that Paul Rudd does age after all, because you see his giant skull hidden underneath his helmet. So again, you've got that Ant-Man suit and his giant corpse there, and it's again just another little reference to the MCU, just a little bit of a thing. We all knew it was going to be there though, because we'd seen it in the trailer. This one was really hard to see when you're in the void, and the great thing about the void is that they're able to throw in all of these Easter eggs, because they're just obviously dealing with this vast amount of space where things just get dumped into. But there's a bit of like Asgard that appears in there, like broken pieces of the castle that are thrown into the void as well. So not easy to spot, but it's there if you look hard enough for it. Similarly, you've got like Thanos' O ships, they're in there as well, again just like scattered throughout the void. The one that I saw first and foremost though was the helicarrier. You definitely see that lying there, and it's just basically crashed through into the void and just lying in this wasteland. And believe me, there are countless more, but those are certainly the ones that I picked up on. So there's loads and loads of things in this. Like, there's just so many cameos, Easter eggs, appearances, characters, throwbacks, shout outs to all of these things. And it just makes the film so enjoyable. And one of the things that Ryan Reynolds has talked about after the movie was released, a lot of people are sort of saying, well, does that mean, you know, Deadpool's going to come back? Is there going to be another film? Similarly with Wolverine, are we going to see these characters again? Well, what Ryan Reynolds has said is that this isn't so much a case of saying hello to the MCU. It's actually more of a case of these Fox characters saying goodbye to the audience and kind of saying thank you for like 20, 30 odd years of just being like loyal comic book fans, going to see the movies, going to see the cinema, and just enjoying these films and just being loyal and loving towards them. So it feels like a bit of a send-off. And at the end of the film, after Deadpool and Wolverine have saved the world and their timeline and every other timeline for that, there is a bit of a sequence during the credits afterwards, and it shows you some of the behind the scenes shots from the very earliest X-Men films, and then some of the other X-Men franchises and Fox franchises thrown in, including Elektra and Daredevil and all of those ones as well. And it's just a really beautiful little sequence that they have thrown together and just put in there. Just really, really touching. There's a Green Day track playing over the top of it, which was just really nice. I really appreciated it. It was quite touching and quite nice to kind of look back and see all of that. And it's amazing when you think about it, how far we've come from those days when X-Men was arguably probably like the first real sort of superhero franchise that ever came out, and then they just were adding to that in the early days. Obviously you had Blade, those Fantastic Four movies and things like that, and those were like the really early days of comic book films, and that's really what this is celebrating. It's those early comic book films where people have just been ever so loyal ever since then, and just really, really enjoying it. So it actually feels, if I'm being honest, like it's a send-off rather than bringing these characters into the MCU, although it officially does. I do feel like it's a bit of a thank you and a goodbye from a lot of these. I don't think we're going to see Deadpool and Wolverine being played by Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman again. That's just my take on it. Ryan Reynolds has said that, you know, ultimately he's not a young guy anymore. He does a lot of his own stunts. I mean, you see him throwing himself around, even in the dance routines. Like he's probably twice my age and I can't move that well. So, you know, I don't know if he's going to want to keep doing any more. The characters do survive the movie. So Deadpool and Wolverine are there at the end of it. So there is scope, there is potential. And they joke about the fact that Hugh Jackman is going to be playing Wolverine until he's 90, and that Disney are going to keep churning him out. And yeah, I do really hope that he does come back, and same with Ryan Reynolds as well. I'd love to see these characters come back again. Whether or not they do it, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, they're not getting any younger. I mean, they look fantastic. I mean, they're still able to do it. There's no doubt about that. But how much longer they can keep doing it for, I don't really know. So I don't know whether or not this saves the MCU in any way, shape or form. I'll talk about that in a different video in the coming days. But realistically, when it comes to this movie, this is just peak Marvel, and it's just really, really cool. I love the way that they've sent it off. I think probably what we will now see is X-Men franchise being rebooted. Deadpool's had his trilogy now. I don't feel like we're going to see him come back, but maybe I'm wrong. And on that terrible disappointment, it is time to end. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed all of these, however many Easter eggs and cameos it was that we've talked about. If you haven't seen the movie, please do go and see it, because seeing it in live action is just so much better, and it is something to behold, I promise you. So yeah, please do go and see the film, and thank you very much for watching. Please give the video a like, leave a comment if you want to, please subscribe, and with that said, I will see you guys real soon.